Hello, I am Mitch Miller. I'm an illustrator and artist, and I am probably best known for making dialectograms. I have a bit of a varied background, I suppose you could say. I sort of started out as a social researcher. I've also been a teacher at university level, done various bits of research and editing work, that sort of thing. And from that background, primarily the kind of anthropological, sociological background, I've always had certain interest in social situations and in field work. But I also had the background in independent comics and magazines. For many years I was involved in the scenes in Edinburgh and Glasgow. And I think through that, the two things coming together, the field work, the anthropological research, and the sort of comics and zines that I was involved in, they've kind of come together and made this mutant thing called a dialectogram. A dialectogram isn't just the drawing, it's also the process that goes into the drawing. And for a large amount of time, for months often, I'm working with a community, a group of people very closely, and they are actually the primary and most important audience at that point, certainly. It's a drawing about them, it's a drawing for them, it's a drawing that they will be seeing and consuming in their own way. So in a sense, they're actually the primary audience and probably I think the most important of all, because they are often the people in the drawing itself. Once the drawing's done, of course, there's a wider audience there. Anyone of an interest in how society works, how communities work, various hidden corners of the city, Glasgow, Scotland more generally, I suppose, is that wider audience. And there's various ways we try and get that stuff out to them: online, books, but usually through some sort of permanent display. And so all the drawings that I do are given in some way to a facility where the drawing can be seen easily. So for example, the Red Road drawings that I did all turned up at the People's Palace and are now part of the permanent collection of Glasgow museums. The Baltic Street drawing, which I've just finished, that will actually be installed at the playground itself, so people can go there and see the drawing and then see the playground. So there's lots of ways in which I try and get it out there and allow people to see the work we've come up with. I think I'm interested in places that primarily are usually not depicted in the mainstream media. They're usually the places that are hidden, misunderstood, or often badly portrayed. And I think if you look at most of the work that I've done, most of them come under that sort of category. The kind of work I do is really good at getting to the complexity of cities, and a city like Glasgow in particular. There's an old story about Glasgow in which a European visitor comes to see it after the Second World War and asks if it was badly bombed during the process, and of course the native guide has to tell him that no, it's just we keep knocking things down and things go on fire every 5 minutes. Glasgow is a city that does change a lot. It always has had this dynamic nature, which is, I think, the pretty way of saying it. The other way of saying it is communities are always facing change, wanted and unwanted, in this city. And I think the kind of work that I do, because it gets communities involved, because it asks communities what they think about their place and tries to get to the knowledge that they have, does strike a chord, particularly in Glasgow, because Glasgow is always going through this process of regeneration and change. And regeneration isn't necessarily bad, but whether it's good or not, whether it actually has value, depends on how it's done. Sometimes the first victim of regeneration is that very aspect of the city, that very core element of the community that really does hold it together, that you may not think is essential, but actually is vital to how the city runs and how the city works. And I think one thing I find interesting for me about these drawings is it does bring a lot of that to the surface. You do start to see how people relate to each other and to their places, and how those things are actually very tightly sewn together. What I'm hoping for is some help with the sort of nuts and bolts of the process, the overheads like the studio rental, buying groceries, occasionally shoes, even if I don't want to go barefoot. Things that just keep things ticking along and allow me to do the work, and also allow me to cut my overheads for any group that I might want to work with. When a group comes to me, I have to make decisions about how much time I could offer to a project and whether it's viable. With more of the day-to-day costs covered, I can offer more time, more support, which is certainly something I would do with patron support. For those who do back me, they will receive regular updates on the work that I'm doing. So that will be called the Dialectographer's Bulletin, which will come out through my blog, which comes out regularly. I like long, complicated titles, as you can see. And that will just keep you updated on latest projects, current process, interesting sneak peeks and previews. There will be some special content as well for patrons where they'll be able to see stuff before anyone else does, early sketches, snippets of drawings that are in the making, or even just side projects that I think they might find interesting. I'm also hoping every year to collect a lot of the material that I make and into a special kind of publication that I'll be sharing around my patron group as well. So there's a range of things that patrons will see and get that they wouldn't get otherwise if they're able to support the campaign.